Many of you have heard of Ken Ham, founder of the Ark Encounter and CEO of Answers in Genesis. He writes in his blog, and yet we know that both a father and a mother are vital for children. You can't replace a dad with an extra mom or a mom with two dads. A mom simply can't be a dad, and a dad can't be a mom because God designed men and women differently, and it shows in their parenting. Well, God's design aside, this has to mean that cishet two-parent homes are clearly superior when it comes to health and well-being, right? And that's why we see markedly different outcomes on things like teen pregnancy, teen suicide, academic achievement, disordered eating. I mean, right? As a therapist who's often sought out by young adults who have been tormented and ejected by such faithful families, I've never seen any numbers that actually bear this thought out, but maybe you have. Or maybe you can call and explain it to us because the show is coming right now. Hey, Jimmy,
Hey,
thank you so much for being here. How are you this
yeah,
morning?
I am doing great. It is a cold New York day up here, but I'm feeling the warmth. I'm feeling the love here with you, Christy.
Beautiful. Well, welcome to Talk Heathen. Today is Sunday, November 12th, 2023. I am your host, Christy Powell, and joining me, of course, is Jimmy Jr. Before we get started, I want to give a special birthday shout out to Talk Heathen's producer, Richard Gilliver. Happy birthday, Richard. You can type exclamation point Richard in the live chat to join us in wishing him a chat. And yeah, I am excited to get started. How are you feeling today?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm having a little audio problem, to be honest with you.
Sure. Well,
I'm
yeah,
here.
it shouldn't be too much of a problem. I definitely don't have any trouble just talking and talking to myself. I can go on and on about this Kevin Ham bullshit and this notion that there is a huge meaningful difference between the way a dad parents and the way a mother parents and the way that, men and women are completely opposite. It's ridiculous. I mean, honestly, we have seen male chimpanzees parenting children without the help of women, even though in chimpanzee society, women do not just 50%, not just 60%, but like 99% of all the parenting. And yet, even in this different species, there's that remarkable potential, and we see positive outcomes. The notion that the only way for you to raise a healthy and happy family is to have a man and a woman in lockstep together, probably with, the woman being submissive to the husband. It just gets my blood boiling. I mean, how does any of that sit with you? What were some of your experiences in this space?
Yeah, I'm back, Christy. Thank
Yeah.
you. But I I was really taken aback by such a claim because what is really only required for something like this is the genetic makeup, right, from a male or female organism, right? But that is a completely different uh relationship when we talk about the actual raising of a child. And Ken Ham seems to think that a man and a woman are necessary, but the to the contrary, there are countless examples of people who have grown up without both parents, and led very good lives. Right now, I have a child in my life, a friend of my child's, who is not being raised by any parents. He's a star athlete.
Mhm.
He is an outstanding student, a great young man, and I'm really impressed by him. And his parents have kind of left and gone off and done something else. But that just goes to show you, really what's all that's required is a loving environment, a safe environment. I mean, this is what is good for a child. Having two people that want to take care of this kid or any kid and raise them to be good people is really that's all that's required. So that's kind of my thought on that.
Yeah, and what just strikes me about all of this is how easily we should be able to demonstrate it statistically. Like, if there was any validity to these ideas at all, and it wasn't just somebody like Ken Ham just saying, it's obvious. I mean, men aren't women, and dads, moms, they're different. If there was any call to actually look at science, if there was any motion or action to consider the research, this should be such an easy slam dunk thing to prove, and something that would give a lot of validity to the Bible and to a lot of the values that are held by these cultures, because it shouldn't be hard to be able to look at, well, what are the incidences of teen pregnancy in places where there are very few out gay couples raising children together? Well, those numbers don't look great. We
Mhm,
should be able
mhm.
to look at teen suicide statistics and correlate that to the number of parents in a home and things like that. When we do that, we do see some disadvantages held by single parent homes, but those disadvantages absolutely evaporate once we start taking out factors like socioeconomic status and free time and, just on and on and on. This is such a clear thing that ought to be provable, and yet there's no effort to prove it because it can't be, because it's just not true.
Right, and I think any effort to prove it would also demonstrate the opposite, right? You would come across the kinds of statistics that you're talking about, specifically grades and issues with mental health and things like that. It turns out that people that are or children that are raised in loving single parent or dual parent households by two members of the same sex actually in many cases turn out to be better off than students that are raised by heterosexual couples. And I think my thought on that is, and this is just kind of my hypothesis, but if you are a same sex couple and you want to raise a child, well, that's not going to happen by accident, right? I mean, you have
Sure. Right.
already made your mind up that you are dedicated to having a family, to providing a safe and loving environment to a child, and so you probably tend to be, a little bit better of a parent than somebody who does this reluctantly or accidentally, or maybe
Or
kind of
because of lack of access to medical care and, a number of
yeah,
other considerations, right?
yeah, for sure, for sure.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah, so that's something I had on mind. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, there's certainly a lot more to be said there, but before we say too much more, I suppose I'll remind folks that Talk Heathen is a product of the atheist community of Austin. We're a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to the promotion of atheism, critical thinking, secular humanism, and the separation of religion and government. We're a live call-in show, and we have open lines, so get your calls in. We're at 512-991-9242, or you can get in touch with us at tiny.cc/callth over your computer. Jimmy, while we're waiting for those calls to come in, let's take a look at last week's Talk Heathen to Me. Our Talk Heathen to Me segment is an opportunity for you, the viewers, to weigh in with your best jokes, your best references. Last week, we asked you the question, what one-liner can you use to get out of conversations with religious people? Our favorite answers, number 3 came from James Larimer, 9211. His one-liner to get out of talking to religious people: evidence or GTFO. These kids these days with their acronyms, I'll let somebody else work through the Urban Dictionary. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Tell us how you really feel. That's pretty blunt. The person on the receiving end of that conversation knows where they stand.
Our number 2 answer came from username Bong Hit Philosophy. I can't imagine what that'd be in reference to either. Their one-liner: sorry, I gotta run. I left a baby in the oven.
He must be an atheist. Don't we all have babies in the
Yeah,
oven
yeah.
somewhere?
Everybody's you got a base. I mean, you can't just walk out of the room. Like, you got to render that very carefully. All right. And then finally, our favorite answer from this past week came from Xmillion1704. His one-liner: looking at watch. Oh shit! I've got some sinning to do. No.
Yeah, that's a good one. Don't we all?
Yeah, well, so we've got a new question this week. We're asking for wrong answers only. Why did God create humans? You can enter your best answer below in the video comments. Make sure to put them in the comments, not in the live chat. When next week we'll reveal the top 3 answers. But Jimmy, what comes to mind for you? Wrong answers only. Why did God create humans?
Well, God created humans because all of the aliens that he already created probably got fed up with all of his bullshit and stopped donating to their church. So God needed somebody else to kind of toil with. Yeah.
Yeah, I like this idea. It kind of kicks the can down the road a little bit
Yeah.
because it implies that like we are not God's only children or even like first children, more just like the ones he hasn't gotten fed up with yet. But then why create those first ones? Why create the next ones? Somebody's got to be tithing. Somebody's got to be praising his name, I guess. Otherwise, he just evaporates into a giant poof of not existing.
Mm, yep.
All right. Well, we do still have some space with the call screeners and some open lines, but for now, why don't we go ahead and touch base with Mr. Warlight in Alaska, who has some interesting thoughts about Islam. Mr. Warlight, walk us through it.
Oh, hey. Hey, so I was like the only person on the call screen, huh?
Yeah, we're at the top of the show. Love to hear what's on your mind.
Yeah, so I would say that Islam has had, even though it's been destructive in some ways, it's definitely had some positive aspects, about it. That is, it has been positive for civilization.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty, like, broadly speaking, I think that's a valid argument to make. I think that there's a lot to be said about the maybe functionality of religion and why it has been able to continue to replicate for so many thousands of years. I am myself not especially familiar with Islamic doctrine or really any of the particular points that you might be bringing up here. So walk us through it. What do you see as sort of valuable from Islam, or what can we maybe take from it now?
Right. So, certain cultural aspects, like, Islam has had various positives for culture.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, there's various 9/11 songs we wouldn't have, without Islam. Like the Black Hawk Down movie.
Yeah, so the joke that you're making here is that we have all of this like very strong patriotic rhetoric because Islam caused 9/11. I'm going to check in with you and see exactly where you're taking all of this, but I'm a little uncomfortable. Jimmy, let you jump in.
Yeah, I kind of don't appreciate that. I don't want to make light of the atrocities that Islam is responsible for. I mean, why stop at the movies or the 9/11 Psalms? Why not talk about all of the children that are molested in Islamic or I shouldn't say Islamic, but in the different orphanages in some Islamic countries, or the way that women are treated under Sharia law? I mean, there's no joke there to be had. And so I wouldn't, posit these jokes and try to be cute about people that are being killed in the name of an imaginary God, right? Broadly speaking, though, if you want to raise the point that religion does do good things, well, I'm not going to disagree with you that no good has ever or can ever come from religion. And that is the argument that we constantly get. And we would routinely reply with, well, that may be so, but religion is not actually necessary for those good things to happen. The good things that you might be talking about culturally, could happen in a variety of other ways, and we know that culture is not just a formation of religion, but it's also other ideas. It could be administrative as far as the creation of laws of government. It could be through arts and entertainment, through language, through different customs and traditions that have nothing to do with religion. So those are a bunch of examples of how good things that religion do also happen without religion. But I'm going to check you just like Christy did, Mr. Warlight, and I hope you're not going to try and come back and make any more grotesque jokes about the loss of life that innocent people have suffered.
All right. Well, I would say there's lots of memes that have come about because of Islam. Still there?
Yeah, we're
here. And again, I'm going to give you just a little bit more leash, but if we're talking about 9/11 jokes and discussing the value of memes in the context of something that has truly global and catastrophic consequences for millions of people. We're talking about the way that people understand themselves. We're talking about violence over the course of thousands of years. We're talking about really meaningful things. So if the next joke is just, the memes are great and the country music is better, I think we can move on. Is there more to it than that, sir?
Well, I like to read you about a meme. It goes something like, "I'm off to meet."
I think I'm good for now, if that's all right with you. Yeah, Jimmy, tacky jokes and off-color comments aside, I do think that there is a meaningful conversation that atheists are sometimes perhaps uncomfortable having about the things that have come through religion and things that we might not be ready to throw away. You and I can maybe have that discussion here in a second, but I want to give you a chance to respond to I don't know, maybe the smart, smug atheist attitude that can sometimes come up when we have some of these discussions. How is any of this striking you today?
Well, just to kind of pick up where he left off, while I don't think that it's anything that he said was funny, I kind of got the feeling that he wanted to talk about memes that pop up that poke fun at Islam, and rightfully so. I mean, that does happen, but that happens to a lot of other religions as well, right? Islam is not one that is being singled out for any reason. We see a lot of these things happen. It does detract from the conversation. I don't really think that any value is added when you start poking fun at other religions. That might be something, where there's an appropriate time and place, but I certainly wouldn't introduce that where I'm trying to kind of gain an understanding and have a meaningful discussion. And the smug atheism really, I think, is not useful, because even as an atheist myself, I would never be smug, because I don't want to put out this vibe or entertain this idea that I have nothing that I can learn.
Yeah.
We opened, Christy, you opened this show with the idea that, being perpetrated by Ken Ham, or propagated by him, that, maybe heterosexual couples shouldn't be having kids. Homosexual couples should not have children. You know what? There was a time in my life where I thought the same thing. And you know what?
Sure.
It was uninformed and it was ignorant. And I had a lot to learn. And that never stops. There's never any goalpost, right? There's always something new to learn. And so the smug atheism, I think, kind of gets people to trip over themselves, really. You have to be open-minded when you approach, a meaningful conversation about these values that are so important.
Yeah, for me, it completely gets in the way of what I come here to do. The reason that I volunteer for these shows, I mean, we're not getting paid for it. It's a good time. I've made some good friends, but I'm not really here for my health. I'm here because I feel like I owe something, that I was rescued from something, and that I would love to help spare other people from wasting too much time and energy being miserable in some of the ways that I was miserable. And when somebody comes in and suggests that, like, oh, religious people have a mental illness, they're just stupid, they are really ignoring both the people who are remarkably intelligent, not necessarily myself, but not myself, right? Who fell for these things, who grew up in communities or in families where there wasn't a whole lot of choice, and who experienced a lot of suffering because of it. So we can maybe move on to the next call if you like, but definitely not a attitude that I like to see in our community, as common as it can be.
Yeah. And one point on that, Christy, it's never easy to tell somebody that you think, like, maybe they dedicated their life to a lie, or that they dedicated their self to something that is incorrect. But, these old traditions, these old habits really die hard. They come from a place where people were afraid of being killed if they didn't go along with it,
Sure.
and that has kind of ingrained itself into this culture, this thing that we just were talking about. And so changing that is a worthwhile approach, right? It's a worthwhile cause, but it requires a delicate approach.
Yeah, fair to say. Well, all right. So, speaking of our community, we want to encourage you to be a part of the atheist community of Austin, not just a passive consumer. And we've got a exciting new way for you to support the ACA and to be a part of that community. You can buy an engraved brick and become part of the Free Thought Library's legacy. Let's take a look at this promotional video.
Have you ever wanted to make a permanent impact on the atheist community of Austin? Help support our space for free thought by buying a custom engraved brick to be laid on the building grounds to help raise funds for improvements. Our building has stood as a beacon for years, bringing people together. But 3 years of emptiness due to the pandemic have taken a toll, leaving it in disrepair. Help us restore this hub of connection and support by buying a brick. Moses had his stone tablets, but we're doing our own version. Join our brick fundraiser and let your engraved messages stand the test of time, minus commandments. Visit tiny.cc/ACA bricks for more information.
All right. Well, I'll tell you what. Let's go ahead and cleanse our palates a little bit. Let's touch base with Alex in Florida. Alex, what can we do for you today?
Hi. So I was calling because I was wondering, do either of y'all know if there's any truth to the idea that in the Stone Age that men were hunters, women were gatherers, or that whole kind of thing?
Yeah, it's way more complex than what you're describing, and I think we see that not just quote in the Stone Age, but in a number of modern cultures. It is actually still very true that a number of not technologically advanced tribes who are living in very traditional ways, that a number of indigenous folks do still have things semi-divided up in a certain sense. But this notion that you're a hunter or you're a gatherer, like you show up for work in the morning and they hand you your protective personal equipment and then you go out and do your assigned job, is not really what we see in those types of anthropological settings. What kind of questions did you have, though? Where was this maybe going?
So I was going to. So I've heard that kind of line of reasoning be used to kind of justify the idea of like stay-at-home moms, as it were. You know, like the men being the breadwinner kind of thing. And I was going to see if you lent any credence to that kind of argument.
I can speak to that a little bit.
Please.
So yeah, the idea of hunter-gatherer is not men hunters, women gatherers. It's one society hunter-gatherer, right? So men could be hunters and gatherers, whereas women wouldn't necessarily be hunters. And we saw that, kind of the oldest evidence we have, we saw most societies based on that. And it wasn't because women were gatherers. It was because they were at home with children, child rearing. They had to feed them, right? A man can't necessarily bring a child out, for the day and not be able to feed them unless they had a woman with them, of course. But the way that those societies were kind of structured, and yes, we do think that was the birth of gender roles. To get back to your original question, where you have women kind of in the domesticated side of things, and men out forming hunting parties and establishing hierarchies. The stronger of the men, or the one with the title, kind of creating the rules and dictating the way things are going to go. So that is, generally speaking, of course, Christy's right to say that is much more nuanced, because that is not a formula for every single society. But from what we can tell, just anthropologically and historically speaking, that is typically what we find, that gender roles probably came out of the division between the domestic side of things and then in the hunter side of things, where men were in hunting parties. So how we looking so far, Alex, or Christy? Do you have something you want to add to that?
Yeah, no, Alex, I'll let you jump in. I can certainly say a lot more, but this conversation can go a million places, really.
Yeah. So I don't really have anywhere else I was going with that. I was just genuinely curious about that, and I figured that y'all would have a good idea, especially talking about it's not. I know you guys aren't specifically talking about gender roles and the origin, but it is kind of related to the same-sex adoption kind of thing that y'all wanted to talk about today.
No,
So
it's an
I'll
interesting
end
question.
that.
Yeah, so there's an excellent book I might encourage people who are curious to check out that's related to this idea, called Different by Frans de Wull, who is a famous primatologist. And he talks about gender sort of through that lens of biology, of the sexual differentiation, and comes to some really interesting conclusions. That comment that I mentioned earlier about male primates raising children being something that we have witnessed out in the wild comes from that book. And it can maybe do a lot to open your eyes about some of these ideas. I think it's important to recognize that when we talk about men doing this and women doing that, particularly in terms of like career or their job, their role in society, that there's going to be not thick lines. There's going to be a lot of differentiation, but also just because men hunt and women gather, even if we were going to label it that way, it's not with the same type of prestige that I think that we might imagine it from like our American or just more modern Western lenses. This notion that men go out to do the hard work while women do sort of the boring housework is based on the assumption that it's like very prestigious to be a hunter, and to be a gatherer is somehow looked down upon. And I don't know that you really see that universally or even commonly across cultures. Really, whatever has been our history as a species, none of this really suggests what our capacities are or what our moral philosophy ought to be.
Well
We're
said.
allowed to do what we want to do, and whether or not one gender or one sex is particularly better at another task or not, better suited to another task or not, doesn't say anything about what one particular individual should be allowed to do, or what we want to encourage people to consider when they're looking at their career, when they're looking at their future, least of all in a modern world where the ability to go out and hunt has very little with the ability to like write software, or the ability to understand sophisticated statistical analysis. And all of these things that we now think of as jobs are so disconnected from that hunter-gatherer dichotomy that to try and apply some sort of male-female dichotomy is just stacking messy, loosely conflated data on top of each other.
Gotcha. Yeah. So I'm definitely hearing what you're saying, and honestly, I agree with the conclusions. I just am, like I said, unfamiliar with a lot of the reasoning that goes into it.
Let me.
Oh gosh, I forget which one. I'm sorry.
Go ahead, please finish your thought.
I thought one. Yeah. I forget which one of you guys recommended the book Different, but I'm definitely going to go check that one out. I appreciate your time today. Unless you guys have any other thoughts to add.
I do. I just want to kind of shed some light on this idea of hunter-gatherer stuff. So Christy's absolutely right. So let's say, being a woman doesn't necessarily make you not capable of hunting, right? It just so happened that at that time, women were not taking children out to hunt. The men were free to kind of do that. There is a difference, though, between hunter-gatherer society and then the domestication of plants and animals, right? And once that happened, then we started to see this kind of conflation of gender roles. No longer did the men have to go out and hunt, and people's roles could start actually blending together, right? And so I want you to leave on this note when we talk about our capabilities, where we come from versus where we are now. When I was doing my my master's, I did a capstone project on the development of gender roles and how actually religion has served to prop up gender roles where they're actually starting to dissipate. And what I found was that the world's strongest economies, this is kind of a product of that, but the world's strongest economies have higher levels of women in the workforce, right? So countries where you have like 30% of women working typically have a poorer economy, where in the United States we have about 66 to 67% of our female population working, and we have the second biggest, if not first biggest economy, depending on how you judge that. And so there is something to say about having women and men kind of both contributing in equal capacities. And so I kind of wanted to just posit that on you before we moved on, and see what you thought about that.
Oh no. So I definitely agree with that. That the best way to kind of organize economies is for everybody to contribute to the workload. And with what I believe it was Christy mentioned earlier, that there really isn't like a specific thing that you're better at based on your gender, and that really all this boils down to is that just having a balanced workload is really what it comes down to, and that is what really helps everybody involved in the situation.
Yeah, no, I think that that's fair to say. It's unfortunate that we are currently living in a society where one gender has been in many, many, many ways dominated by another because of a lot of bullshit science. And I think a lot of people would try to point to a half understood representation of anthropology as some of that bullshit science. So I don't know that we are all called to become anthropologists, or that we all need to be experts in like neo-humans or any of these ideas, but it's important to not be thrown off by some of this rhetoric. And so I really appreciate you raising all of those points. I do think that that's a great book for you to check out. I might also encourage you to consider Sex at Dawn by Christopher Ryan. But in any case, take a look, see what you find, and then maybe give us a call back.
Yeah, thank you very much for your time today, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day.
Absolutely.
Take care,
You as
Alex.
well.
Thanks.
Thanks so much. Okay, well, we have a few more calls coming in. I'm going to read a quick super chat and then hit some announcements, and we'll get right back into it. Yeah?
Yeah.
Cool. Well, so Ben 9 Lives offers $4.99, asking the question, any suggestions on repelling bigotry by some parents who teach their children to shun gay couple households?
Oof.
That's a tough one.
Yeah. In my experience, I just think exposure to the thing that you're taught to hate usually proves it wrong, right?
Sure.
I don't know how that might, I don't want to give
Particularly
advice.
when we're talking about kids, there's
Yeah,
real
yeah.
value in just showing them like, hey,
Yeah.
my husband and I aren't awful.
Right.
So
Right.
do with that information what you need to, son.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. Well, this month at Talk Heathen, we have a new limited edition t-shirt with a very, I'm going to call it secular sexuality bent prayer, because God already knows what you want. He just loves to hear you beg for it. Love that. Love that line. Visit tiny.cc/merchaca to get them now. And Jimmy, let's talk to John in Texas if we can. John, what's on your mind today?
Hello. Yeah, I was just scrolling through YouTube watching my feed, and I saw y'all talking about atheism, and I like to come on here every so many years and debate or like oppose y'all's belief systems, because I know y'all like to act like you're super objective, so I like to kind of expose y'all's mindsets. And
sure. Well, let's get to the thing. Don't tell us why you're here or what to do, but why are you calling? What is the issue that you maybe take with some of our positions?
Yeah, so I like I said to the call screener, I have noticed there's like this capitalistic corporate colonialist mindset that comes along with atheists, and they do tend to oppress indigenous or tribal people and their way of life. And I think your mindset and your ideologies and
Yeah, well, I'm gonna just
your
cut you off there because
culture,
that's not
right?
my mindset or my ideology. You've made a pretty big claim that atheism may be associated with capitalistic and colonialist ideals and is being oppressive towards indigenous people. What evidence can you give me of that claim? Can you point to any strong examples, something from the headlines, anything in particular to help us understand why you would come to that conclusion?
The whole, like I said, like the whole mentality of atheists is to be.
Don't tell me about a mentality. Tell me about an example because you don't know my thoughts. I'm not going to
I'm
pretend to
literally
know
telling you right
yours.
now, like how narrow, how closed-minded and narrow-minded.
I
Atheists
haven't
are, like,
talked about that at all, John. I am going to actually cut you out entirely if you're not going to try and answer some questions for me and have a conversation. I'm not interested
And
in vibes. I want
and
to hear
John,
some facts.
how can you call Christy close-minded when he is asking you actively to expand and to give proof? I mean, that is somebody who has opened the door to any possibility that you can levy at him. So let's hear
He
it.
literally said he wants a name to like a person or like a specific event. When I'm like, yo,
Well, why don't
your
you?
whole
Well, you
ideology and
you
the way you're
talked about
speaking about things.
you talked about colonialism, okay? Atheists propagate colonialism, okay, or perpetuate colonialism. Give me an example of atheist colonists.
Atheist colonists. See, this
Yeah, did the atheists come to the New World and set up a bunch of missions or torture a bunch of the indigenous people for not accepting their belief system?
Well, yeah. They posed as believers. Like it's not. I
Okay,
don't know.
this
I like how
Oh,
like
so
you
the
defend that.
church did it.
Wait. So
It
now we're
wasn't
not
the
going to
church.
talk
It
about.
wasn't the
Yeah.
cat. Yeah. All right. I'm going to give you a short
Yes,
leash
it
here,
was the
John.
Catholic Church. Yes, it was
Okay.
the Catholic Church. But I'm saying literally, there are people who are in positions of power who, like, are not representing what they're supposed to actually be believing in. Like a person in a Christian church isn't going to always represent Christian ideals and beliefs. Like there could be corrupt people in positions of power, and
Sure.
that's not a true believer. Like someone who actually believes in God isn't going to be doing bad things.
Are you saying that every bad thing
right?
done by every person claiming to be a Christian is actually secretly an atheist in disguise corrupting the organization? So, like, by definition, all the bad apples in your barrel belong to us?
No, I said no.
Okay. No,
This is
defend that. Walk me through it.
the narrow-mindedness that I'm talking about right now. Literally, I just said people can be put in the position of power, and they're not actual representations of the thing they're supposed to be fucking representing. I don't know why me saying that is you flipping it to me saying now everyone who ever commits a sin is actually a non-believer. No, I never said that.
Well,
Okay,
yeah,
well,
you did.
let's start over a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because
Yeah, so
I don't
so
think we're understanding each other at all. So I'm going to maybe
please-
give you another
Yeah,
chance to just very straightforwardly show me an example of how atheism is causing issues for indigenous folks. That's very, very broad. There should be countless examples. Yeah.
Okay, indigenous people believe in spirits. We believe in like these voodoo, juju kind of ideas that quote unquote atheists would consider to be nonsensical and crazy. Do you agree or disagree with me?
I'm going to push back on
disagree.
so much of that. Yeah, we
Yeah.
disagree. Indigenous folks are not a monolith. By definition, they're scattered all over the world.
And I wouldn't call you
I
crazy
never said they were a
for
monolith.
doing that. I would ask you to have a discussion about it, which is what we invited you here to do today. And so instead of telling us what we think about you, why don't you just tell us what you think and then support that? That's what the platform is here.
Want me to
John.
tell you
So
what I think?
so atheists, right? Atheists are capitalist corporate colonists. Okay, that was your claim. And so I'm not being closed-minded. I am willing to hear anything, any support that you have for that claim.
Do you think that Native American people, as atheists, are being mistreated and underrepresented?
Do I think as an atheist that Native American people are being mistreated and underrepresented? I think as an atheist, me, that Native Americans have been dealt an extremely negative circumstance to the point that underrepresentation is so far in the rearview mirror, and it's unfortunate, right? They were well, massacred. They were wiped out. They were genocided against for a long time by people who gave them the Bible as an alternative. And now we're at a point where there are so few of them left, and I assume that you're talking about in the United States, that underrepresentation is a discussion that has a long way to go before that could even be a possibility for them. I think it's horrible. I think the history is embarrassing. My wife is part Native American, and I think that she would find it incredibly surprising, and she's an atheist, by the way, to be told that atheists are, perpetuating or carrying out attacks or, are disparaging or discriminating against natives in any way, Native Americans. I think that's quite the opposite.
Culture.
While I might disagree with many,
Native culture,
while I might disagree that many of the beliefs that they hold, right, and it's not just them, it's everybody, are unsubstantiated. I don't think they're crazy. I don't think that they're stupid. I think that they are unproven. And that's the simple math to being an atheist. You came on the show and said, well, atheists' belief systems, quote unquote, belief systems are bad for Native Americans. And I would push back and say that atheists don't have a belief system. I simply reject religious belief systems because there's no proof of them. But what's happened to Native Americans in American history is a horrible thing. It's probably mostly responsible to people who wanted to conquer lands in the name of their gods, and to levy that upon atheists is extraordinary. I mean, that is an extraordinary claim. And so you made that claim, and we were asking for examples, but that is my long answer.
Your proof is based in science. Your proof is based in science, and that's what you believe in. Is science. That is your religion.
I need you to
spend a lot of time telling us what we think and what we believe, and very little time telling us what you think and what you believe.
I'm telling you what I think and believe about you.
And you're wrong.
Well, it's neat, but you're demonstrably wrong. I mean, there are hundreds of hours of videotape of us discussing what we believe as a community, representing the values of this organization. And then, frankly, just of Jimmy and I talking about what we personally believe on many of these topics that you're bringing up. And so I can show you that, sure, we're talking about your beliefs, but your beliefs are demonstrably incorrect. How is this getting us any closer to your central point? And with an eye towards the 10 minutes that we've just spent on this conversation, can you help us get to your central point, please?
Yeah, again, like I said, I feel like you have a certain mindset, and it's hard for you to look outside of your point of view. That's why I say there's a closed-mindedness here.
John, I used to be somebody that thought that two men that wanted to raise a child was absolutely grotesque and harmful to children. That was about 20 years ago. I had that mindset. I have not had that mindset in about 15 years. Okay. So I opened myself to the idea that I could be wrong, and I reversed course, and I changed my ways based on the things that I was told, the evidence that was provided to me, the experience where I was able to witness two men or two women raise really outstanding children. And so I don't see how I'm closed-minded. That is one example. And so, yeah, we're getting kind of far away from where we started, because we still haven't got any examples. I want to show you this. This is red, white, and black. Okay. history of Native American peoples. And no point in the book will it mention that natives were subjugated by atheists. In fact, you'll hear a lot about, different religious causes that colonialism took as part of the reasoning for why it took place. And so I don't have any more to add. Christy, I'm going to kick it back over to you.
Yeah, I'll just say, John, I'm going to give you the last word, but to suggest that we are closed-minded is pretty ridiculous to me, just on the simple fact that you had the opportunity for the last 12 minutes to have a conversation with Jimmy and I, in which you asked us what we thought and believed and encouraged us to change what we thought and believed. You didn't do that. We created an organization. We set up this opportunity for people to call us and to talk about our beliefs. You took up that opportunity. You came in and you very close-mindedly and dogmatically told us about ourselves. And when we pointed out how just damn wrong you were, you held on to that and you kept going. You kept pushing it. I would love for you to go back and to watch this clip over again and try and find who's being closed-minded and who's being open-minded, and to really ask yourself whether or not you are in any way willing to make the mental leaps that you are accusing us of being unwilling to consider. Do you have anything to say to that before we walk out, John?
Yeah, I'll make a review video and send it to you.
Hey, I look forward to it. Don't think I won't. Please, tv@atheist-community.org. I would love to see your responses. We would love to better understand where you're coming from. We don't hate you. We're just pretty convinced you're wrong here, friend. You take care.
And I would like to hear back from John in the future. Take some time, use this experience to come up with a more formulated argument. And I'd really be happy to talk to you again about this, because this is something that, this is a deeply held problem I have with being an American, that, we have to just own this, the things that happen to natives. So that's all I got on that.
Okay. Yep. I guess that's all from John. I'll drop him out of the queue. Thank you so much. Fair enough. Okay. Well, I'll say let's go ahead and talk to another theist in Canada, Mr. LaRoche. What's on your mind today?
Yes. How you guys doing? Yeah. How you
doing?
Guys
All
doing?
right. Yeah.
Very well. Very well. Thank you.
Thank you. So my position is this: I'm a Christian, and I believe Christianity is substantiated. And anyone who denies that denies reality.
Okay, those are your claims, sure.
Can you demonstrate that Christianity is reality?
Perfect. I was hoping you would say that. So I'm going to provide a syllogism. It's a modus ponens. So first premise: if Jesus can demonstrate universal sovereignty, that will make him God. Premise 2, Jesus did demonstrate universal sovereignty in virtue of the fact that he predicted the universal adoption of the 7-day week as the sign or evidence of his authority over all creation. And conclusion, since every nation keeps the 7-day week now, the last nation being subjugated to a 7-day week was the USSR, going against their religious and cultural practices. That proves that Jesus is God. So which premise?
So if there was any nation on earth, and does it have to be a nation? Like if there was an individual person on earth who didn't use a 7-day week, it has to be a nation that uses a 7-day week. Everyone on the earth does?
It has to be a country. Yeah, it has to be a country, because we're talking about calendars that were held for religious and cultural purposes. So in virtue of that, Jesus being able to subjugate all nations going against their cultural and religious practices shows that he has sovereignty over them.
Nations and countries are not the same thing. Nations and countries are not the same thing.
Okay, but I qualify a nation as a country. If you disagree with that, okay, replace the word nation with country. So country, every country is subject to a 7-day week. You're under the sovereignty of your government.
So Jesus subjugated all countries? Jesus subjugated all countries? He subjugated Saudi Arabia?
But only in this very specific. Like, he could have made it safe for all of the Israelites, for all of the Jews across the world, really just for all vulnerable people. He could have made it safe for everybody and created a one world government that was reasonable and responsible. He could have protected everyone, but he used his universal sovereign powers specifically and exclusively to make sure that everybody used a 7-day calendar, and therefore he is the Son of God.
How many countries are in the world, Mr. LaRoche? Mr. LaRoche?
Wait, we're going all over.
No.
Thing, or are you guys going to put a whole
How
bunch
many
of things that's
countries?
irrelevant?
How many countries are in the world?
First of all, it's based
World.
every calendar in this world. There's a ISO calendar. You go Wikipedia it. Every calendar.
I don't want to Wikipedia.
7-day week.
Specific question though.
You said
that wasn't the
Jesus
question.
subjugated every country, and I want to know how many countries keep a 7-day week.
Until like the last 50, 60 years, the fall of the Soviet Union. There were other nations, including like the French Republic, that used a 10-day calendar, and there's some exception finding to be found. But okay, every modern country on earth largely relies on a 7-day calendar. Therefore, God, help me.
Okay, can you repeat your last statement? Because you're all over the place. I'm trying to address one thing. You came with 10 different points. Can you address one point?
Okay, let's just go ahead and say that every country on earth currently uses the 7-day calendar. That proves
Amen.
God how?
I just gave you my 2 premises. You still haven't addressed any of them. You came with
I heard them. I heard them, and I did ask the question, like, okay, at what point did Jesus, if we want to use that label or this particular term, I know that these nuances can matter. If Jesus said that there was only going to be 7-day calendars, when did he say that? When was that prediction made or that prophecy spoken?
So now you want the evidence of the second premise is that he made the prediction. I could give you that Isaiah 66:23 compared to Isaiah 20 verse 12, Ezekiel verse 12, 20 verse 12, and Ezekiel 20:20. There's a whole bunch of verses. But I'm trying to understand here because I brought you a syllogism. Now we're going and trying to understand whether or not the syllogism is sound. So you agree with
just trying to understand your basic idea here. This is Talk Heathen. We ask people what they believe and why they believe it. If this was about trying to beat Mr. LaRoche in a debate, I wouldn't have showed up this morning because I don't care. What I do care about is the way that people treat each other, how they get their moral philosophy, the way that they choose to vote, the way that they choose to donate their money. And so I am very interested in what people believe and why they believe it. I'm capable of walking through a philosophical argument, and I would encourage you to do so with me, but I need you to help me understand you because I don't really give a shit about the individual points so much as what you believe and why. So please walk me through your syllogism. I understand that you expressed that there is a universal sovereignty held by Jesus Christ, that we know that there's a universal sovereignty held by Jesus Christ because he predicted or prophesied that all nations on earth would use a 7-day calendar. And I'm asking you to help evidence that for me a little bit.
So am I unmuted or?
You were never muted.
Okay, I'm sorry. I thought I was unmuted. Okay, no problem. So here's the thing. So now we're not addressing the validity of my argument. So therefore, it seems to me that you understand that if the soundness of every premises are, if my premises are sound, then
I'm not granting you that. I'm asking you a question that I would like for you
so you want to go to
answer
soundness
so that
before?
I just want to understand you as a person, and I'm losing patience. So please talk to me like a human being.
Yeah, I'm trying to understand what you want to argue. Are you arguing the validity of the argument?
Nobody's arguing.
Answer one specific question, and I will get a little bit touchy with that mute button if we can't get through this one specific question. My very specific question is, what evidence do you have that shows that Jesus Christ made the prophecy that the entire world would eventually use a 7-day calendar?
Isaiah 66:23. I said it like 3 times already. That's one of the verses.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, multiple other verses, but Isaiah 66:23 is good enough.
Sure. All right. Well, let's hit Isaiah 66:23 very quickly. 66:23. And it shall come to pass that from one new moon to another, and from one Sabbath to another, shall all flesh come to worship before me, saith the Lord. You are telling me that the passage that I just read is synonymous with, or ought to be interpreted as, all nations on earth will eventually use a 7-day calendar.
Exactly, because according to first principles, hermeneutics, and normative standards, the word Sabbath is intrinsically linked to a 7-day week. That's Genesis 2, verses 1 to 3. So when it says from Sabbath, I'm trying to answer your question. So when it says from Sabbath to Sabbath, in order for that to be fulfilled, you have to have a 7-day calendar. So in virtue of that, that means.
I'm just curious because it says
deductive reasoning.
It shall come to pass that from one new moon to another new moon shall all flesh come to worship before me. Where are you getting the Sabbath? When they should new moon worship be mentioned along with the Sabbath worship. I don't understand where you're getting a 7-day week from new moon to new moon. Am I missing something? Mr. LaRoche? Are you there?
All right. Well, yeah, I think the thought that I would like Mr. LaRoche to take home with them is to just consider, all right, okay, fine. In your mind, your syllogism has defeated me. Your philosophical understanding, your hermeneutics are so much more sophisticated than mine. But who here is convinced? Of the no doubt thousands of viewers that will eventually catch this video or listen to this podcast, who has listened to this and thought to themselves, oh yeah, this verse in Isaiah proves that Jesus is Lord. And if there really was an all-powerful God, this is definitely how he would demonstrate his universal sovereignty. I would love to better understand where the hell you're coming from, Mr. LaRoche. I'm sorry that we can't hear you, but I guess we will move on. Fun ones today, huh, Jimmy?
Yeah, that was a little kind of all over the place, man. He was getting a little worked up, and I wanted to kind of rein it in and stay on topic. He's passionate, maybe he'll call back and we can figure that out. So I had a few questions, but thanks for calling, Mr. LaRoche.
Few questions indeed. All right. Yeah. Well, cool. Before we get too much further, I want to make sure that people who are interested to see us live and in person are able to do so with the Thanksgiving holiday coming up. That's going to be just next week. If you happen to be in the Austin area next weekend, November 19th, 2023, please join us for the live broadcast of Talk Heathen and Atheist Experience. Talk Heathen will be hosted by me, Christy Powell, with Forrest Valkai and Jamie Boone. Very excited about that team. And AXP will be hosted by Forrest with Jamie the Blind Limey. Doors open at noon. We hope to see you there. Okay, if you're feeling brave, Jimmy, we can go ahead and jump into another call with Joshua in South Carolina. Yeah?
Yeah, Joshua's been waiting. I'd like to see what he has to say. He really wants to talk to us.
Fair enough. Josh, what's on your mind today?
Christy.
Howdy.
Hey.
Hey. Nothing super important. I was reading a popular fantasy series not too long ago. Or rereading, actually, and I had learned that the author was actually a Mormon, and so that kind of put the actions of a character in a new light, who kind of started to struggle with his faith after a bad misfortune, and the way it was written, it kind of like faith had not made sense to me for a long time, but I mean the way it was written kind of I guess sort of like put it in a new light, and I was struck by the way that faith, I guess, to be convincing, it seems like it needs to mean both that that you have hope that good things can happen to you or in the world in general, but also means that you have to accept things without any good reason to think that they're true. And I'm wondering, do you have like a good way to, like, when you're talking to people, do you have a good way to disentangle those ideas? Like, I've watched the show a lot, but I don't. Do you have a good method for doing that?
Yeah, it's certainly tricky. Faith is one of those very elastic terms that tends to mean whatever the person who is saying it wants it to mean, and never means what they don't want it to mean. It can be really, really difficult to nail down, and so I think the conversation has to include asking people, well, what does faith mean to you? You know, when I say that I have faith that the sun is coming up tomorrow, I don't think I mean the same thing as somebody who says that they have faith in the Lord Jesus Christ to save their soul. But I don't entirely know how to parse those things out. Jimmy, can you help at all?
Well, as far as what I would do in order to kind of show how maybe or disentangle this idea of faith, I tend to point to the history of how religion comes about. You know, this is not a phenomena that is new, and it is incredibly nuanced. And a lot of the religions that we have come from other religions that predated it. And they share a lot of the same characteristics. So I kind of like to talk to people about what they believe in a very matter of fact type of way, without kind of poo-pooing on their ideas. So a couple of the things that you said, Joshua, were faith could be, just a way of people saying that they hope something good happens to them. Yeah, I would attest that most people think that faith is kind of this wishful thinking, but it's not, like you said, something that happens without good reason, or believing without good reason. Now, many of us atheists, I think, are comfortable with that phrase, right? Faith is the belief in something without evidence, or you have no good reason to believe it. But at some point, and most of us on the show, or most of us with the ACA, were theists before, and we had good reasons to believe. The reasons for me were that, well, people I trusted gave me these ideas, people that took care of me. They were bigger than me. They were smarter than me. They fed me. They protected me. They gave me clothes and shelter and a lot of fun times, Christmases, birthday presents. Of course, they must be right about this, right? And that was good enough for me as a youth. And that kind of thing just carries along. People bring that through their entire lives. And especially when you come from a community that has elders and songs and psalms and books about it. Well, it all has to fit together, right? It all must mean something. And I think that that's where most people end up on it. And so I wouldn't say that it's no good reason. For a lot of people, it's a good enough reason. But yeah, getting into it and dissecting it, it has to be done, like I said earlier in the show, very delicately, because you don't want to put people down and make them feel stupid. We just had a last caller or two callers ago that said, well, we think that people who are spiritual are all stupid and crazy. That's not true at all. That's not true at all. And the last thing I want to do is have an educated, informed discussion with people and give them the impression that I think that I am superior, mentally or otherwise, or if they are any less than me because they have this belief. I just happen to be somebody who dug a little bit into what I was being told, some of the counter arguments to the things that I grew up in, taking courses on the literature of the Bible, learning about the origins of Greek mythology, learning the origins about Zoroastrianism, or how at the same time that Christianity was being born, there were other religions that already existed, and those were born from previous religions. That's kind of my method for approaching it, because I think by doing that, by being able to point to history and being able to kind of give these enlightening, facts, if you will, you're not attacking the person directly. And so that's my tangent, Joshua. I hope that wasn't too much for you, but I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
No, that's good.
Okay.
I guess my thought is, have you heard of the curse of knowledge?
Are you talking about like a specific piece of fiction or the broad general concept? How do you mean?
The concept. the epistemological concepts.
Yeah. I mean, sure. The things that we know can get in the way. Help us see how it connects here.
Well, so I used to be a believer a long time ago, and I recently became an atheist, but I've been like basically agnostic for a long time, and so I had completely forgotten what it was like to have faith or to think that faith was a good thing. I just like it felt like and I guess it's sort of an arrogant way of phrasing it, but I feel like I have knowledge now that epistemology is supposed to work this way.
Right.
And
sure.
So faith, I mean, yeah, I'm not going to say that people who have faith like that are that I'm better than them, but it has been confusing to me for a long time why anyone would think that way.
No, and I think that same cognitive bias, that same like curse of knowledge ideal shows up on the other side of the aisle in these conversations. I mean, if we recognize that the word knowledge doesn't necessarily have to mean facts, it doesn't necessarily have to be something that we believe or know to be true that actually is true. And so often we'll have conversations where people will say something like, well, this Bible verse very much proves that God is in control of the entire universe. And they just know that to be true on such a level that they can't even comprehend that somebody else could look at that Bible verse and be completely confused. So it is a barrier that gets in the way of a lot of these kinds of conversations. And it's something that I encounter constantly in my work with people who are recovering from religious trauma. There's so many things that they maybe just take for granted as being true that when somebody outside asks questions or offers some confusion around it, it's hard for them to even necessarily understand where the issue is or what confusion or problem might exist.
Mm-hmm.
And Joshua, there's something that we left out, or I left out, that Christy kind of alluded to, and that is the idea of religious trauma. People are tormented throughout their lives with this kind of thinking, and can't think of anything scarier than pushing their thoughts, their beliefs to the side, because it is just a horrifying outcome for them. And on that note, I'm not going to let Christy walk away with this without mentioning it, but we did have a caller on Truth Wanted on Friday night by the name of Emmanuel. Emmanuel is a frequent caller of all our shows. And Emmanuel, if you're listening, I'd love to chat with you because I've never talked to you before. But I give a lot of credit to Emmanuel because he said some things the other day. First of all, that the ACA has helped him, and I'm going to quote, along his journey. And I think that is an awesome thing, that he's on a journey. But he specifically mentioned Christy, and I would say give Christy a very congratulatory pat on the back. But that just goes to show you that Christy's familiarity with working through religious trauma and helping people with that kind of thing it sheds light on the fact that a lot of people will hold on to this trauma for a really, really long time. Sure. And that is the good reason that they have this faith, no matter what. And so I'm proud of Emmanuel. I wanted to shout him out on Talk Heathen today, but I'm proud that the work that the ACA is doing, and I just wanted to kind of put that plug in there.
Oh, no, thank you. I appreciate it. And I'll let you go, but before I do you guys have any good book recommendations?
Oh, boy. Well, what kind of books you looking for?
Fiction, nonfiction, any kind of.
Sure.
Anything.
I'll tell you what. I am lately, for like the last 3 months, I'm like, I don't know, become like this Egyptologist, right? I've been studying everything Egypt, and I'm not afraid to admit it. But I got this book right here, Everything You Want to Know About Ancient Egypt and Nubia. Okay, fully explained. Dude, I am learning so much about Egypt. I'm like beside myself with facts and information. So I guess I'm just gonna plug that book for you. I think it's been great. But I will tell you this: there are a lot of podcasts that I listen to that are historically based. Yeah, I mean, there's one that I listen to called The Ancients, that spreads a lot of that has a lot of information on ancient religions, ancient cultures, which I think you'll get a lot out of. And so I would go there maybe, but I pulled a book down for an earlier caller. I've got a whole shelf full of books. So if you want a history nerd's opinion, I'm into Egypt right now.
All right, I'll look into it. Anything from you, Christy?
I'm going to stand by my recommendation of Differences by Frans de Wull. This past summer, I hit a lot of Frans de Wull's work in primatology, and I'll tell you what, it will make you question what it means to be human in some pretty powerful and interesting ways. And I think, Are We Smart Enough to Know How Smart Animals Are by Frans de Wull is also a really, really excellent piece of work. So yeah, if I can offer you any book club recommendations, that might be my one for right now.
Sweet, I'll look them up. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, take care.
Take care.
Well, we've definitely been all over the place today, Jimmy. I'm not even sure what to say about some of these questions and conversations. On the one hand, it can be incredibly, I don't know if demoralizing is exactly the term I would want to use, but some of these conversations can be frustrating, and it can feel like the open-mindedness or lack of open-mindedness that we encounter is pretty overwhelming. But as you said, there's always an opportunity to find something new, to offer somebody some level of support, to see somebody make some level of change. So, I suppose I have to ask, what keeps you coming back? What keeps you volunteering or just drove you to have some of these conversations?
Oh man, well, I would say my search for knowledge, right? Like I am the first person who will admit that I have so much to learn. I have learned so much just through like schooling and things like that. Kind of going on this quest for education, and I found the ACA, and all these conversations are happening that have just been so great. And even though I get the demoralizing call here and there where I'm accused of being something I'm not, or the person accusing me of being some way actually is exemplifying that more than I am.
Right. Yeah.
I have a tendency to say, you know what, let's just chalk it up to maybe a misunderstanding and move on. But I want to keep coming back, hearing the great works that I'm going to call you my colleague, but you and the other people around the ACA are doing, and having people point to you by name and say, this person helped me, it's really refreshing. You know what I mean? It's really refreshing. And, I just want to be able to help people too. I want to encourage people to have the conversation. I think that when I first found the ACA, I said to myself, holy crap, there are people out there having this conversation, and I've never heard it before. And so, we serve as examples to people that you can have the tough talks, and that's what I like doing.
Yeah, no, fair to say.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we've got a couple of other announcements and some things to hit. You've got our top 5 patrons for me, yeah?
I do have the top 5, and I'm happy to read off some very familiar names, friends of the ACA, I'll say. But our top 5 patrons this week: Dingleberry Jackson, Oops, All Singularity, Devor Valjean, Kalevi Helveti, Left in the Leaves, and honorable mention, Ali Shable. So thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you for continuing to support the ACA. And we look forward to having you stick around.
All right. Well, fair enough. I suppose I'll remind people that our prompt for next week is wrong answers only. Why did God create humans? Make sure to reply in the comments and tune in at the beginning of next week's episode to hear our top 3 answers. Please make sure to come in and see us live in studio next week if you can. And with that, I suppose we want to get ready to offer some love rings. But first, we need to say thank you to our incredible crew who I left out at the top of the show. These hardworking folks that have done so much to get us on air and make all of this come together. Thank you all so much for your help. And before we disappear, Jimmy, you think we can sneak in one more call?
I do. Yeah, we have Chauntelle, I believe her name is. Yep.
Yeah.
Chauntelle
in Massachusetts. Yeah. What can we do for you?
Hi. So, sorry, I'm nervous. I know I'm going to be on
Sure.
YouTube, but so I'm agnostic
hmm
and I'm deconstructing from Christianity, also the New Age movement.
Mm-hmm.
So both of them at the same time. It's a little bit hard. So I had two questions. The first one is, like, I know some people say they have near-death experiences and stuff like that, and I get confused. That's where the deconstructing part comes in. So I was wondering if you guys had, like, an explanation for that.
Yeah, an explanation
any-
for
any-
why people have near-death experiences.
Yeah, basically, like, the science behind it, if you guys know.
Yeah,
Like, anything
I mean,
like that.
it's certainly broad, right? Like there are so many different things that can cause a quote near death experience. When somebody is close to death, they have an experience, and we tend to lump all of these different stories and all of these different sort of pseudoscientific or spiritual, mysterious events into one particular category. So there is not one singular answer to all of these different experiences. But what you really start to notice once you scratch the surface is brains doing weird brain things. You know, it's worth acknowledging that our brain is not a switch that just gets flipped off and on. It's not like your brain is either working or it's not working. It's actually a remarkable number of different processes and components that can all be working together or perhaps against each other in some really weird and interesting ways. You know, one common sort of near death experience has to do with people sort of losing their sense of being grounded within their own body. And what we understand in psychology is that our groundedness, like our connection between our mind and our body, is very tenuous, that it's never 100% integrated or 0% integrated, that we're always some level of grounded. You know, if I were to ask you, Chauntelle, about like your big toe on your right foot right now, you might start to notice some sort of sensation there. You weren't really thinking about your big
Yeah,
toe and you weren't
probably.
really feeling it. Yeah. When I bring it up here, like you start to notice, oh, okay, there is something there. And you start to move it around, whether consciously or unconsciously. And I just want to highlight that our bodies are doing that all the time. And when we are bringing in incredible amounts of pain, which can overwhelm and shut down our nervous system, when we bring in things like a lack of oxygen or a number of different dissociative anesthetics and other drugs that can come in and complicate all of this, these very complex systems can get thrown out of whack in some very interesting and bizarre ways. Now, when it comes to near death experiences, every single time we've done any amount of valid scientific research to try and understand what's going on, we have found something that disproves the sort of magicalness of it all. We have done tests where things that have been written in places where a free floating spirit might be able to see them weren't witnessed by that free floating spirit. We've done all kinds of different examinations of these experiences. And each one, when we are able to understand what's going on, is a normal everyday phenomena, like the things that I described about being ungrounded or having these different toxins in your body or all of this sort of stuff. I don't mean to go on, but I guess what I just want to demonstrate to you
No, it's
is
okay.
that brains are weird and they can get fucked up and get really kind of played around with.
Okay,
Yeah,
yeah, that makes sense. Sorry. It's been hard to deconstruct. All these things are going through my head.
Hmm.
So Chauntelle, I'm not the the expert on brains, or I have no background in clinical psychology or anything like that. But I will say from my own experience, I'll just bring up my military service, for example. I think that there is kind of this mass hysteria type like phenomenon that happens. The word escapes me right now for what it is, but for example, if you look beyond the 1950s, right, when we first started getting reports of UFOs, all of a sudden we started getting many reports of UFOs, right? Or people saw maybe little green men. Then every account after that started becoming little green men. These ideas that are posited, right? They kind of manifest themselves in our own ways of thinking to the point where we start creating scenarios that mimic the very things that were implanted there previously. So in our own time, for example, we had an example a couple years ago, where a Chinese spy balloon flew over the United States, and the United States shot it down. But after that, every single balloon that was in the air, everybody perceived to be a Chinese spy balloon, And I don't think that that's much different than near-death experiences, because we go through our lives hearing about the tunnel with the light and seeing our dead relatives. And, when we start maybe coming to an end or experiencing a set of circumstances where our brain is acting funny or maybe shutting down, we might relive those things that we think we're supposed to be reliving. They're posited there, and we think that that's the natural course of events, so that's what it must be. And so I think that there's a lot of there's kind of this default state that we create based on the information that we absorb over the years. And it's no different, in my opinion, than, false reports of things that make us go, oh, well, it must have been, maybe it was Bigfoot or something like that. I hope that makes sense to you.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Because I was a little all over the place, and I was starting to lose myself there for a minute, but I hope I reined it all in for you. Yeah. Well, I know that you were nervous to come on YouTube, right? But you're doing a great job. So I wouldn't be nervous if I were you. Do you have maybe anything else that you wanted to kind of pile on to what Christy or I said, especially Christy, since he gave you the more credible answer?
No, I think you guys covered it mainly. I'm just like all over the place right now. I didn't know what to do. I was like, I need to talk to someone, and I've been watching you guys' channel, so
yeah.
I don't know. It's been
you ever been religious?
I appreciate that you're watching shows like this. Yeah, y'all go ahead, please.
I'm sorry, Christy. I got excited, but I was just wondering, because she said she was agnostic, right? So I was wondering, like, were you ever religious, and if so, what changed it for you?
Yeah, so I was okay. So it's kind of confusing. I was Christian. Well, I was in the New Age movement, and then someone told me it was demonic, so I was a Christian, and it was kind of like a cult, basically. Because I don't know if this is all of Christianity that makes people feel like this, but I was told that there were demons in me. They needed to give me an exorcism, and for me, I have mental health issues. So I already know that it was part of my mental health issue. I was going through mania when they were trying to like give me exorcisms, if that makes sense. I don't know. And basically, they told me if I watched. All right, I'm not even going to lie. This is the craziest thing I'm probably going to say about it, is that they told me if I watched Disney movies, it was demonic and it was going to put a demon in me or whatever. I do not know what they were talking about. It was just very traumatizing. And what else? They told me I had to fast for 40 days, actually. They told me I had to do that, because it would get the demons, quote unquote, demons out of me. What else? Sorry, I'm talking too fast.
It sounds like you were given a lot of info that just didn't add up, huh?
Yeah,
you had to overcome some pretty difficult things.
I can't really think of all of it, and I'm probably not making sense when I talk because I'm still going through that trauma.
Sure.
So sorry if I didn't make sense.
Yeah, I mean, what kind of support have you been getting as you work through this process and try to heal from some of these ideas?
So I've been in Facebook groups for like recovering from religion, recovering from Christianity. I haven't found any groups for recovering from New Age, but I am in like this group chat for it, but it doesn't really help that much because they don't answer the questions as well as you guys did.
Sure.
So, yeah, that's basically what I've been doing. And
Yeah.
it's really hard.
Yeah, the Reclamation Collective has a number of groups that are centered more around spiritual abuse that may be a really good fit. I think you mentioned recovering from religion, but I don't know if you're familiar with the Recovering from Religion Foundation, which is a organization that you might want to take a look at. I don't want to just overwhelm you with resources because I know that a lot of this process can be sort of slow and painstaking and difficult and overwhelming. But I would encourage you to look at something like Leaving the Fold by Marlene Winnell, which is a really excellent book on this topic. More than anything, though, I would just hope that you wouldn't have to go through this process by yourself. That you would have some sort of support and community around you, because the things that you're suffering, the pain that you're experiencing, didn't come from just an old book sitting on a shelf. It came from a community of people.
Yeah.
It came from other people convincing you that this was right and that was wrong. And so to heal from that suffering is usually going to involve having a good support group, having people around you who understand what you're going through. So I really encourage you to take a look at some of those organizations, to maybe find a support group, or to just find like-minded people who understand what you're going through.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like the Facebook groups have helped me mainly, but just the other groups that I'm in for, like I said, for New Age it's like it doesn't help, but I will figure it out. I'll definitely figure it out.
Yeah, well, sounds like you are well on your way, and I really appreciate you sharing part of your journey with us. Is there anything else that we might be able to help with or point you towards today?
No, that was it. That was mainly the thing that I was stuck on.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I hope you have a great day and that we get to hear from you in the future.
Yep.
Thank you.
Take care.
All right. Well, Jimmy, I'm glad we were able to sneak that one in. That's why we
Yeah.
do it, right? Like that's where you feel like you can actually be helpful when you have an opportunity to offer some real good. So I think to Chauntelle, I want to send out a bunch of love rings. I definitely want to send some out to Recovering from Religion and the Reclamation Collective and some of these other organizations that are offering some support. Anybody else you want to send those love rings out to as we get them charged up?
Yeah, Mr. LaRoche, we lost your call. We were talking, we lost your call. Love rings to Mr. LaRoche. Yeah, oh, there they go.
Well, y'all take care. Jimmy, thank you so much for being here and doing this with us. And, I guess this is the moment where we just remind people that, we don't hate them, but what?
We're just not convinced.
We want the truth, so watch Truth Wanted live, Friday at 7 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/YTTW and call into the show at 512-991-9242 or connect to the show online at tiny.cc/calltw.